So when y'all get new clients, how do you prepare for that? Whether they're coming into shelter or outreach?
I think when we have new clients that are coming into shelter, we definitely want to make them feel as comfortable as possible. So it starts from, making sure when we're on the phone with them and we're screening them in, giving them a very detailed description of what shelter is like, what they should expect when they come to shelter. Also talking about that staff is here 24 hours a day to assist them with any concerns or needs that they may have. We'll also talk about, coming into shelter and sharing spaces with others, and what that could be like. It can be very challenging for someone who is coming, even though they're coming from, a trauma situation, but they're also coming into a shelter that is a new environment for them and living with new people. So we want to definitely make sure they have a clear understanding of what shelter life is like. When they do come into shelter, we want to make sure that we introduce ourselves and explain what our positions are, and how we can better assist them. So that's some of the things that we do to make it as comfortable as possible for residents coming into shelter.
I think in outreach, I think it's we want to have some context, so we like to read hotline calls and try and get some context on what brings someone to us. I think that can provide us some insight, but also really just paying attention, asking open-ended questions, reading cues that our clients give us, and a lot of that I think sometimes is just trying to gauge whether they're uncomfortable with a certain situation or environment, and trying to then accommodate that. So paying attention, asking questions, and then really actually being interested in the answers to those questions.
I think too it's important to consider outreach. Kind of like what you said at shelter, we want to make sure the client's as comfortable as possible, because that building can be intimidating with all the police and the cottage, and people are just coming in and out constantly. And the conference room, it's just like, I would feel like if I was a client, it would be a little awkward to do an intake in this giant conference room, So I think just being aware of that,
Yeah, I think too at outreach, since it is a shared building, making sure they feel like they're in a space where no one's going to be overhearing their conversations, and it's going to be, obviously confidential, and making sure it feels safe.
Absolutely.
One of the things that's a little bit different about Rapid Rehousing, I'd say, is that they usually have met with an outreach advocate in the past. So I usually make sure I'm reading over all of the case notes and hotline notes and kind of see what the other staff member has established about what's going on. And from there, I just kind of talk a lot with them and ask them a lot of questions about their current housing situation and making sure that they're homeless due to domestic violence. And I discuss a lot with them about what their expectations for the program are and what they're needing. And I make sure not to make too many promises or anything like that. I don't want them to feel, like they've been lied to if something doesn't work out in the future with something that I promised. And then making sure that they understand that the program's not going to fix everything, and what are they needing to establish housing for themselves.
And I think it's a really good point when you're meeting with a client for the first time, is to establish that, not everything is going to get solved in one day. They don't need to make all of their decisions in one day. And that you're here for them throughout the process of making those decisions as time goes on.
Yeah, and I think that's like a game changer to kind of like establish those expectations, and realistically, what can Project Safe do? Because we can do a lot, but at the end of the day, it's up to them to change the situation or the circumstances, or and so
I think it does a lot for building trust with clients when we provide that context and expectations. And I think every little thing that happens that is kind of in keeping with that, every time that we do keep a promise, whether it's just a promise to be in touch with them in the near future or to follow through on something that we discussed, every little bit of that is about gaining trust, and ultimately I think building rapport with clients, because without that we can't really do a whole lot.
I was gonna say, we've talked about this a lot before, but just, being real with the client, and, not setting up those expectations. And I remember when I was an intern, I would get so caught up in what is like the textbook of what am I supposed to be doing. I kind of would forget that, this is a person like standing in front of me. So remembering not only is it a client, but it's someone who has all these feelings. And, if this was, obviously there's boundaries, but if this was my friend or a family member, what kind of support would I want them to have? And trying to remember that in the process.
And
I
that
think-
looks different for each
Right,
course.
yeah,
You
exactly.
know, when we're talking about individual advocacy.
Mhm.
So we want to make sure that they do feel supported, but also have those expectations that you may not receive the same services
Exactly.
as someone
As
else.
someone else, yeah.
I feel like that would be harder to kind of balance in shelter, where everyone's like living together
Yeah,
and
you can
they,
see.
you know, they start to develop a friendship or whatever, and it would be hard to be like, oh, this, I feel like a resident would come to you and be like, well, so and so, you took them to work for 2 weeks. Can you take me to work for 2? You know what I mean? And then so it's kind of like navigating those communal living issues as they come up too.
I think it's, again, being very transparent.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Being very transparent that you're not going to receive the same services as
Yeah.
someone.
Mhm.
But we are here to be your support, but helping them try to figure out, what's going to work for them.
Yeah.
And the reason why we're making a decision for one person may not be the reason that we're making it for you.
Right.
But we do take into consideration all of the aspects of one's
Mhm.
needs.
Yeah.
And so I think, again, just being very upfront and open about, what that looks like.
Yeah, I'm excited about the separate rooms here at Shelter because I feel like that's going to be a huge,
Game changer.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think,
Yeah.
people being able to have space to go back to
Yeah.
their own room,
Mhm.
and being able to process things or to calm down if they've had a very challenging day.
yeah.
De-escalate.
Definitely. So, I think that the single rooms are going to be a good space,
Mhm.
for them.
I think that raises a good point about, like sometimes our clients aren't happy with us.
Yeah.
And
Right.
sometimes our clients need space to be able to express their frustrations with us. And I think we all probably have a different style in approaching that. I think for me, one of the biggest things is, like you said, being transparent. And if someone comes to you and says, I'm upset because you didn't do this or because you did do this, we're people too. And so taking a moment to really check yourself and
Yeah.
not respond out of a defensive place, but really
Reactive,
stepping back and
yeah.
saying, like, did I do something that warrants an
And
apology
owning
here?
that.
Do I need to change something about what I did? And, if so, at the very least, acknowledging that client's feelings and that those feelings are valid. And if I did something, that could have been done better, naming that and acknowledging it.
Absolutely,
None of us
yeah.
are above making mistakes.
Well, and we want our clients to know that, like, we're all figuring life out as we go along, and none of us are perfect, and I feel like it really helps to see that, like, oh, they're just like me, in some
Yeah.
ways.
Yeah.
I think a big reason, kind of looping back to, what's the word?
I don't know. Report.
Rapid rehousing rapport building?
No, why clients get upset is a lot of times it is because of like the expectations that they have. So I do like to, remember if I did make a promise to them that I didn't follow through, or if I was clear on like what their expectations were for the program and whether or not, I could deliver for them. And so I kind of use that as a time to kind of reflect on what I've been doing and if I did do something like Casey said.
Well, the colors.
Go ahead.
Well, making them feel as though they can come to you to do
Right.
that. That if they have a question about a decision that was made, that they have the right to ask why it was made. And I think, definitely explaining to them in the beginning why that decision was made is helpful.
Yeah.
In them understanding.
Yeah.
So,
I feel like too, like navigating this conflict in a healthy way is such a different rhythm for them in their lives, because so, I mean, for a lot of these clients, they're not used to being able to say like, hey, I'm frustrated by this, or this really hurt me.
yeah.
And so being able to say that, but then get this like, I'm sorry, and like, and kind of moving on from there, I think is huge.
Something I try to keep in mind is, a lot of the clients that we have are older than me, and they've just been through things that I can't really fully understand. So even acknowledging, like, listen, like, I can't understand what you've possibly been through, but I can do everything I can to be there for you and help you along the way. I think goes a long way when you just kind of acknowledge, like, listen, like, this is your journey, and I just want to be there for you.
Yeah.
And it's also,
Yeah,
I don't know everything.
yeah, exactly.
But if I don't know, I'm quick to say, but I will call and I'll ask.
Yes.
And so I think,
Always.
being upfront about that is also helps to, make
Make it real.
make it
Yeah.
real, but make them, that relationship of trust.
Yeah.
Make it solid.
What were you gonna say, William?
It's also a good opportunity just because the one thing didn't work out for whatever reason. It's not necessarily the end of the road.
Yeah.
You can have the conversation about different options. Sometimes they may need a time to cool off before that conversation, but still taking the opportunity that it is a journey. And so there's going to be multiple steps along the way, and sometimes it's a matter of finding the right steps.
But having options.
Exactly.
And so we definitely talk about here in shelter, I call it the ABC. So making sure that you have more than one options. Of course, A being the, that is your choice. That's what
Right.
you want to see happen. But then B being, okay, if things don't work out, but I have this option, and C being kind of your final, but still being that you have options if something does not work out the first time. And I think sometimes that's when frustration comes in, when it's all set in one, excuse me if you will, but eggs are in one basket. And so I think when they have options, then it makes them feel as though they have ownership, and have some, there also is accountability on your end for what you need to do as well.
Right.
And it's also gotta be like a new experience that's kind of like invigorating to realize like, oh wait, I can decide what my options are, What were you gonna say?
I was just gonna say, I think individualized goal setting that, and really, and that being a conversation and not saying these are your goals, but asking what are your goals and like, what do you think is required to meet those goals and talking about how like goals, that's a conversation that we have ongoing. Your goals may change. You can't control the external factors that impact what it looks like to be trying to attain those goals, but we can try and make plans, we can do all of these other things that are very empowering. And making sure that folks know that your goals are going to look different from anyone else's goals, and that process is going to look different as well, but that the goal itself is what we're working towards, but also that the process feels empowering and respectful.
Do you guys ever have clients who just like don't even know what goals they want to achieve? You know what I mean? They're just kind of like, I'm here and that's as far as I got, now what?
Yeah, a lot of the times I do have clients that are obviously really focused on housing. When you don't have a home, then obviously it's really hard to think about what your other needs are or what you're needing. And so a lot of times, they're really stuck in the mindset of like, I need to be housed and I need to be housed tomorrow. And so I just kind of go through with them what, even though that is the most important goals, and obviously rapid rehousing is a lot on housing first. So we'll work towards their other goals, once they've established like a safe place to live. But what are they needing in order to get housed? Do they need to be aware of what their credit score is? Do they need to be working on raising their income in order to like keep up with their rent? And so just kind of helping walk them through it just by, even if they only have one thing they want, it's just you working with them and trying to decide what else they're needing to attain that goal.
I think another big thing too is like to think about what is sustainable.
Right.
That's huge.
Yeah.
Sometimes what I'll do when a client comes in and doesn't have like a, obviously they want to be safe, and there's those big ones that, the reason that they're there, but sometimes I'll think like, okay, well, ideally, like, give me a list of what can we realistically do right now to give you some relief. Are there even little things we can just to be able to scratch something off the list is helpful sometimes. And naming what's realistic for now and what can we kind of put on the back burner to deal with later. And being able to give them the opportunity to say like, okay, I didn't like move into a new place today, but I went and talked to my landlord about it. That's something you can check, and it's a stepping stone toward that goal. So
Another thing that we have residents in shelter, and within 3 days we try to complete initial advocacy. And that's where we sit down and we talk with them about their goals. And the biggest one, of course, being housing, because this is a temporary shelter, but we may talk about employment, we may talk about education. So just kind of helping them have a clear idea.
It can be overwhelming.
It can be, so we're kind of here to help them clarify some of those goals. And for instance, we might have someone who is saying they want to, save for transportation. And so we'll talk about, budgeting and all those other pieces that come along with saving. And so, just kind of helping them step by step with the goal that they've chosen for themselves.
I think too, like a big thing that I tell my clients anyway is like, there's no topic off limits that we can talk about, Whether it's like healing from an abusive relationship or getting into a healthy relationship or
Parenting.
Yeah.
school, jobs. I mean, really anything's, anything's on the table. What do y'all do when you're kind of like having difficulty getting a client to trust you, and like really tell you what's going on? I mean, I feel like
It's hard.
it happens sometimes.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing to do is to acknowledge it, and I like to communicate to my clients that I'm not entitled to your trust simply because I'm here and I work in this position.
Yeah.
But that I intend to earn it, and really asking what that looks like for them.
Mm-hmm.
What would make them feel more comfortable with me, and then really, I think at a point, getting to whether that advocacy relationship is serving them well. Because I think for some people, there may just be personality clash or style that doesn't work well, and our end goal is not to convince our clients that they like us, but rather for them to receive the services that they need and feel supported in the process. And so really, sometimes having that conversation about like, do you think that you would have more success working with someone else? And if so, that's okay. And really keeping the door open for that. But
I feel like, you communicating that to a client communicates that they're valued, and that, it matters if they have a good relationship with their advocate, and it matters if, X, Y, or Z.
And like, even like when they say like, I don't know if I feel comfortable sharing this, being able to say like, the fact that you're able to express that to me, it shows me a lot that you're able to express that need to me. That's very important. And, being able to empower them on the small things, that they may feel ashamed of, and saying like, you may see this as a weakness, but it's a strength in so many other ways.
Yeah, I think it's also important to understand that, or just to accept that someone just during the first meeting, especially if you're doing like long-term case management, they might not trust you on the first meeting, and I think that that's okay to earn their trust, like how we talked about earlier, by being consistent with your promises and being clear about what you can do. I think that over time, I work with my clients for a year, so a lot of times a lot of information does become clear and they're more open with me as time goes on, and they learn that they can trust me. And so sometimes you just have to accept that first meeting, not everything's going to come together. They're not going to immediately trust you just because, they're meeting with you.
And I definitely think for residents that are in shelter, it's always a continuous, it's a continuum of definitely creating that relationship.
Yeah.
One of the things is kind of stepping outside of not always being such a formal meeting. Sometimes you may want to just go outside and sit with them, or I may go upstairs and check in with them, throughout the day. And I think, those continues kind of help with building that relationship with the residents here. They're seeing me outside of just meeting in an office and we're talking about goals, and we're having conversations just about,
anything.
talking about anything.
Yeah.
So I think, that's helpful as well.
Yeah.
I think it also is really helpful, just allowing them to have the space to feel whatever they want to feel. If they're mad at you, if they're upset with you, or just upset in general, just the fact that they can feel that with no negative repercussions goes a long way towards, I think, establishing that trust.
And that it's like a non-judgmental atmosphere.
As advocates, we always have to be checking back in and reminding ourselves, like, this is not personal, and if I react as though it is, I am no longer effective in whatever role I'm playing in this person's life. Which it can be difficult when you're feeling frustrated or depleted. It is that much harder to really come from a place of patience and compassion first, and not feeling not feeling personally attacked or targeted for whatever reason. But that's just not the case. It's not, at the end of the day, it's not about us.
We're all here because you want to help people.
Right. That's what you need to take care of. Talk with us and find out how you can best take care of yourself to not take it personally, to not react from that place.
I think too, when that does happen, that's why we need to talk to each other and communicate, and there have been days where I've called shelter and been like, hey, I just I need help with the situation or whatever, and no one's around at the FPC or vice versa. I was just gonna ask a question that I have forgotten. what do y'all do when you're working with a client that you're really invested in and you have done, all these things to help that client kind of reestablish their independence, and they choose to go back to their abusive partner?
I think first understand that it is their choice.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that making them feel as though that we're always here to be a support to them, no matter if they choose to return to their abuser.
Mm-hmm.
So I think creating that relationship, creating that trust, creating that, that they feel as though I'm making this decision, but I still have Project Safe, and I can call them, and I can talk with an advocate there, and I'm still going to be supported, even with the decision that you may not necessarily want for them.
Right.
And so, we have to, again, take himself out of the picture and talk to them about how they can maintain their safety. Let them, continue to get maybe counseling, some other resources that may be helpful. They're definitely excited to reunite. So I think again, we just need to make sure that we're always focused on safety and making sure that we are keeping what's going to be best for the client. That's our number one priority.
Yeah.
That's good.
Do y'all often have clients who maybe go back to their abuser and then come back to you wanting to leave that relationship? How does that pan out?
I think that's part of the process.
Oh,
And I think a lot of people come back to us with a great deal of shame and guilt about what's happened.
Yeah.
I think number one, if they've come back to us, we've done something right. Like you were saying,
Yeah.
we
That's like a big
communicated some trust, to them so that they feel comfortable coming back. I think the first thing to do is to try and neutralize as best we can those feelings of shame and guilt, because it's not about us. We don't have, our job is not to identify which choices of theirs are right or wrong, because that's not really how this process works. And for some people, they have to go back another time in order to, have the resolve to leave for the last time. It's part of their process, and who are we to say what their process looks like?
Yeah.
So I think it really is about picking up right where you left off with them, or just it's as though they didn't do something wrong because they didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think if you do feel really upset about one of your clients going back, or you feel like personally hurt by it, that might be a sign that you might be crossing the boundaries with that client. So taking a step back and understand that you really shouldn't be that emotionally invested. You should just, like Tanya said, safety plan with them, and then always hope for the best for them, but hope that they understand that they can always come back, and that it won't hurt my feelings, it won't make me mad, and that they'll never do anything that means that they won't be able to receive services in the future.
Something, and I haven't personally dealt with a client yet who has kind of gone back to abuser and come back to me, but in ITP, a lot of the women will say, what is wrong with me? Like, why does this keep happening? And when I try to remind them, because I don't have the answer to that really, but when I try to remind them is like, how wonderful it is that you can keep loving despite being hurt, being able to recognize. I always go back to like, how can I build them up from this, without, in a healthy way, of course. You don't want to encourage, negative behavior, but, saying like, the fact that you can still love after being broken so many times is wonderful, It just kind of taking me back to there.
Well, and I mean, I love to point out in similar situations where a client has said, like, I'm in another abusive relationship and we've been together for this amount of time, and here are the red flags that I've noticed. Y'all, I had a client last week tell me, I remember when you talked with me about lethality factors, and there were 14 in that relationship, and I have a copy of that checklist, like a blank copy, and now I have 20.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been 5 years, and and so when seeds are planted like that and they stick, I mean, I'm just like,
we never know
because
what's gonna stay with the client.
No.
Yeah. Which is why we have to choose our words so carefully, because even something that we think isn't going to hit very hard, if it has even just the slightest message of anger or frustration towards them, you never know what that can do to the relationship. Just like you never know what something that we might see as really small, how significant that can be to something down the line.
Yeah, I mean, and it's funny too, because things we do that are kind of we do them daily, multiple times a day.
Think about it.
Yeah, and I mean, there's so many times that those things come back and they've grown, and multiplied, and that's really cool.
Because we can get so caught up in routine.
Exactly.
Yeah, gosh, yeah.
But the impact that we're gonna have on someone, as you mentioned about, lethality factors or them recognizing red flags, and all those things are important, when they are also choosing to be in another relationship. So I think it's important for us to be consistent as well and making sure that we are, doing what we need to do.
Whenever I have a client that's like, man, I should have seen this coming, or why did I do this, or why did I stay with him for 20 years? I always think like we do the best with what we know when we know it. And, sometimes that is all we know. They know is abuse. Sometimes all they know is unhealthy relationships. And until you learn different, why would you do anything different? You know what I mean?
Right.
And I feel like that is such a struggle that, all of our, well, not all, but most of our clients have.
Yeah.
One last question. If you could give one piece of advice to a new person coming here, what would you tell them?
As an intern,
Or staff person?
I would say observe, watch the things that people do around you that they maybe don't think about, but observe those little things and observe the effects of those little things. Keep an open mind and come at every situation as a learning opportunity. And keep doing that because you don't arrive at having mastered any of this.